Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you guys here. Welcome to our masterclass, What's New in Microsoft Teams Optimization. Today, we're joined by Fernando Clerfan, Jelko Mitsanovic, Todd Hsu, and myself, Amber Pichet. Hi, everybody. I look after the marketing here at Ferroque. Fernando Clerfan has an extensive background working with Citrix Systems. He started his career with Citrix as a sales engineer and today is Group Product Manager in HDX, Microsoft Teams, and Service Continuity. With an electronics engineering degree and a deep interest in end-user computing, Fernando enjoys working on projects that are often complex, requiring the consideration of variables that impact multiple areas of the organization. Fernando comes to us today as an expert in Microsoft Teams optimization. Jelko Mitsanovic is a leading expert on Citrix virtualization technologies with over 30 years working with Citrix and Microsoft platforms. His knowledge in project delivery, technical considerations, and customer knowledge across industries is invaluable to each of our customers. During his tenure at Citrix, Jelko sat on the CCAT board and contributed to the development of various Citrix consulting standards and methodology refinement. He remains a trusted and respected member of the Citrix community, both within and out of Citrix. And finally, Todd is one of the earliest pioneers of Citrix solutions in North America. His technology solutions consulting firm, TH Consulting, Inc., was acquired by Citrix in 2012, and Todd was tasked to lead Citrix's consulting organization in Canada. Today, Todd is the president and partner of Ferroque Systems. Welcome, gentlemen. It's great to have you guys here.
Thank you, Amber.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, everybody.
So are you getting the most out of Teams? For many of us, video conferencing was something we were familiar with prior to the recent happenings. However, I bet video conferencing was really only used for meetings abroad and not necessarily with your team who quite literally live in the same neighborhood as you. What COVID-19 did for the remote work revolution was accelerate it beyond most people's understanding. Today, we have adopted video and audio conferencing, and many of us use it daily. It has replaced in-person meetings, eliminated the need for travel time, and simply changed the way we work. With team members working remote, corporations have adapted to virtual desktop infrastructure and remote computing. Running video and audio conferencing over VDI has become more and more important, due in part to the confidential nature of many of these conversations. Work from home, however, does not implicate that end users have company devices that are secure. And so such things as thin clients are being used to provide infrastructure to ensure a secure working environment for all users. Today, we're going to look at why Teams optimization is important in VDI. What's new in Teams optimization? We'll take a look at some architecture and configuration, some common issues and how to overcome them, and finally look at a couple case studies. If you do have any questions along the way, we would love to answer them, so please add them to the chat. And for now, I ask you to sit back and relax, and I'm going to hand things over to Fernando.
Thank you, Amber. So there are a few reasons why customers deploy Teams in VDI. Centralizing the application in a data center brings the usual benefits around security, control of the information, where it's stored, etc., etc. We've been doing Citrix for a long time, and we all realize the benefits of centralizing the application. But for HDX, the most challenging, I would say, workload, it's multimedia. Because multimedia has always been a domain where the user experience it's directly tied to the performance of the network, the resources on the VDA, on the virtual desktop. There are quite a few challenges for delivering multimedia virtual channels, and we have been doing this for quite a while now. I know customers that deploy multimedia workloads in their VDA, and they do not optimize the traffic. That's possible. That's one way to do it. And you got to take care of proper resourcing of your servers. Make sure that your network between the data center and the branch office it's able to sustain quite a few megabits required, for example, for a video conference. You got to make sure that the endpoint can sustain the processing power and put GPUs on the data center. So all these things have to take care, and some customers do it, if they don't have a deployment that's very large at scale, it's definitely possible to deliver Teams in the virtual desktop without any further optimization. But that requires additional resources, and the network also has to perform at its best. If none of some of these conditions are not met, then you have a degraded performance. Features, especially around video, become more challenging. You might see video freeze. You might see audio video get out of sync, and other artifacts that come by rendering the video on the virtual desktop. So the best solution for this type of workloads is to optimize. So we always have developed and deployed solutions that try to offload all the multimedia traffic to the endpoint. We started back in the day with Windows Media Redirection, and then we did Skype for Business, and now we're doing Teams, WebEx, Zoom. We are always trying to do the same, is getting all the multimedia traffic off the VDA and let the endpoint handle it directly. So optimization, it's the word we use for this type of solutions where a media engine is installed on the user's machine and it's handling all the modalities, audio, video, and screen sharing. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the roadmap, what's being released lately. We're also going to focus later on some common pitfalls to avoid, but Teams is such a dynamic application that there is something new coming on every release, especially of Workspace app, because Workspace app is where the media engine is, and that's where we put most of our effort. So these are just a few of the things that we released in the last releases. So you can see that we included 2 features, secondary ringtone and app protection compatibility in our last release. So it's included both on the LTSR and in the current release, 2204. There are other big features that are also coming over. So multi-window and give-take control. That was supported before in Windows, but now it's also added to Mac and Linux. Although the feature flag has not been yet rolled out by Microsoft, this is imminent, coming next month. So these have been blockers that we've seen customers request constantly. Multi-window, it's the new meeting experience, or sometimes called pop-out chat. Give-take control, very in very high demands by customers that have a support organization that needs to take control from a user's machine. App sharing has been another one in huge demands. This is already released, by the way, app sharing for Windows and Mac. We added it to Mac in 2203. So the app sharing is the capacity of sharing a single window. So as you can see, there are big features that we released, some that are coming over next month, some that are already available, and there are many more that we're working on. Some of those are under NDA, so I cannot disclose them at length, but definitely we can do follow-up with customers that have NDAs, and we can discuss the entire roadmap at length. A bit on the history. We've been doing multimedia redirection since the very early days of HDX, and our journey with Microsoft started with the link optimization pack. That was the first one that we officially released together with Microsoft. So that goes over a decade ago, and since then we started this relationship with Microsoft in everything they do with unified communications, and we have a bridge between the two organizations where people from our multimedia organization talk to their engineers at Microsoft, their peers, and we have been doing this for quite a while. Many of the engineers that work together with Microsoft for Skype for Business optimization then moved into Teams. So it's a very long-standing relationship that we have with Microsoft, and we hope to continue forward from Teams and into the future. I'm going to start discussing a little bit about the architecture, because it's important that you understand a few key concepts, and that will give you a good insight into the roadmap. Once you start connecting the dots, you might be able to understand why a feature it's not supported in VDI, or when you can expect it, because everything goes back to the media engine. The native Teams client that you install on your PC, for example, that uses a media engine that's proprietary. It's something that Microsoft owned and developed, called SlimCore. That's the name of their media engine. And that's one way to use Teams, the native client. And then you also have the web client supported in the most popular browsers. So the teams.microsoft.com website. For example, I'm using here, it was Chrome. So either Chrome or Edge, the media engine when Teams runs on a browser is based on WebRTC, the open source technology. And WebRTC is a different media engine than the one that the native client uses. Hence, there is a difference between the feature set that you get in the native Teams versus in the web Teams. And Citrix and all VDI vendors, but Citrix specifically started the development of the Teams optimization solution using WebRTC as well. So we kickstarted this project with Microsoft in 2018, and we launched the product in 2019. So we've been doing this for quite a while now. We have over 3 million monthly active users using the Citrix solution for Teams optimization. And the WebRTC media engine is closely aligned, the one that we use in Citrix, it's closely aligned to what you see in the web client. So the feature gap that you see between the native client and the web client carries over to VDI. So some features that were not supported in the web client were not supported in VDI by inheritance. We are closing that gap fast now. I hope this year, 2022, is where we close all the major blockers and deliver the features that people have been demanding, like background blurring and app sharing was another one, give take control, multi-window, QoS, and there are others that we have planned for 2022. So we hope that we are going to close this gap. Although some items will be still in the backlog, they are minor items and they are not blockers by any means. So back to the Citrix solution. So the media engine, as I said, it's based on WebRTC. You still need to install the Teams client on the virtual desktop, like always. So that's the MSI version. But the moment Teams detects it's running on a virtual environment, then it switches media engine and it starts relying on the media engine that we package with Workspace app based on WebRTC and on a few other things that are runtime code. So the moment you sign in to Teams, we are going to download an API that's part of the solution and other configuration parameters and feature flags, and that's how everything starts working together. We rarely require a new MSI version. You should keep up with MSI versions just because Teams does many other things beyond multimedia, so you might want to update Teams and keep it up to date for other reasons, maybe chat and collab or file sharing, etc., etc. When it comes to Citrix, we rarely require a new MSI, although there are a few exceptions like multi-window where you do have to upgrade to a minimum version of Teams. Okay, thank you. Now, Amber, next slide. So in this slide, I wanna walk you over the release cycles and what's being released and how you can prepare for Teams. The main components are in Workspace app and VDA. Those are the components that you control in your Citrix infrastructure. Although the VDA we do not generally touch. So when a new feature is introduced, we try to avoid any VDA change. We mostly focus on Workspace app. There are a few exceptions to this rule, but that's what we try to do. So how does HDX release new features? More or less, it's every quarter. So every quarter there is a new Workspace app version that has significant new features, and we try to always align to the VDA release. So the CVAD release happens in the last month of every quarter. So March, June, September, and December. And in those months, it's where we try to introduce big features. So Workspace app, for example, 2106 included multi-monitor support when doing screen sharing. And then the next quarter in the 9 release, so that was in September, we introduced app sharing for Windows. Then in Q4, in December, we introduced multi-window and gifted control for Windows, etc., etc. So you can see that the last release of the quarter is where we put most of our efforts. There are interim releases, so Workspace App has a 6 weeks release cadence, for example, for Windows, but we don't use the interim releases for new features. So, for example, I don't know, Workspace App 2205, it won't have much, and Workspace App 2207, it won't have much. Maybe we'll have some bug fixes, some security patching, but when it comes to new features, it's on the 3, 6, 9, and 12 releases that we're going to focus on. That means that as a rule of thumb, you should plan to upgrade every quarter. Maybe you can skip a release if there is a feature that you don't desperately need, but more or less that's the cadence, and you don't have to upgrade more frequently than that. And again, the VDA we always try to avoid any new code. And the exceptions to that were a multi-window and app sharing, which did require a VDA upgrade. But other than that, for example, gifted control, it does not require a VDA change, and multi-monitor for screen sharing did not require a VDA change. Secondary ringtone, it did not require a VDA change. So I see customers that stay on the 1912 LTSR on the infrastructure, but keep up with the Workspace app. There, it's important to stay current. A quick note on the LTSR. So you can see, there that in 2203 we released a new LTSR. So we forked the code. There is one branch that keeps getting improvements. That's the current release. So that's where new features come on. But then on the LTSR, we stop introducing new features, and that's in this case the CUs, the cumulative updates, will not receive a backporting of a new feature. That's important to keep in mind. You can stay on the LTSR if desired, but just make that decision consciously. The new features will very likely come in a new Workspace app, and there it's important to stay current. A high-level overview on the architecture. So on the right, we have the virtual desktop. So we have Teams installed in the golden image, which also includes the Citrix API. When Teams detects a VDA and a user signs in, it's going to download the Citrix API, and that API is the way that we communicate between Teams and the VDA. So Teams opens a WebSocket connection to a few VDA services, and then the VDA will open a virtual channel all the way to Workspace app, and Workspace app will instantiate the WebRTC media engine, and the WebRTC media engine now will handle all the RTP media directly from the branch office network, either to the internet, or if there is any MPLS link or some sort of VPN link back to Azure. But the RTP media now it's handled exclusively by Workspace app. Teams on the VDA will still do all the signaling and all the other activities that are not related to multimedia, like file sharing and chat, etc. That's still handled by Teams. The signaling for the multimedia, it's also handled by Teams on the VDA. But the moment that any audio, video, and screen sharing activity needs to be performed, it's offloaded to the Workspace app. Hence, the importance of keeping up to date with Workspace app. So Workspace app for Windows, for example, as I said, releases every 6 weeks. You have a minor version, but the big versions, the 3, 6, 9, and 12, that's the month. So those come every quarter. So 2203, 2206, 2209, and 2212 will be the big releases this year. Teams as an app, Microsoft has a very frequent release cadence. I think technically Teams can auto-update every 2 weeks. Although, as I said, for multimedia and for Citrix specifically, we don't see new features coming out in that release cadence. The most important component in Teams right now, when it comes to Citrix, it's the API that you see there, and that's released by Citrix every 6 to 8 weeks. We hand it over to Microsoft, and Microsoft is in charge of the downstream release. So you don't have to worry about that API. It's transparent. It's not a component that you have to download and install in your VDA. It's a runtime code that gets downloaded the moment you sign into Teams. So yeah, overall there are 4 components. So Teams MSI, the VDA, workspace app, and the last component. It's not a Citrix component, but it's very critical. It's the branch office network. So remember that all the RTP traffic, all the multimedia traffic, now it's uploaded to the client, and the client will reach either directly to another peer or through a conference server if it's a multi-party call. But the network plays a big role now. The network in the branch office. Then we have to select which versions we are going to deploy. Now the Citrix admin it's often posed with this question. The unified communications champion in the organization comes to the Citrix admin and says, we need to deploy feature X, Y, and Z because our business unit A, B, and C require them. And then the Citrix admin has to prepare the proper version. So the Citrix admin has to match and map the feature request to the proper workspace apps, especially, and also VDA versions. And then you can start seeing how the version can fork. So you can stay on the 1912 LTSR. You could stay on the 2203 new LTSR. You could stay on a current release of the workspace app. You could stay on a LTSR version of the workspace app, 1912, 2203. There are many scenarios or combinations and permutations. So it's important that you decide which one is the most fitting deployment model based on the feature request that you're going to get from the teams group in your organization. And there are a few combinations, but the ones that I always like to focus on, it's the latest, because again, Teams, it's an application that's very demanding in terms of the media engine. So we have to keep up to date there. You could stay on the 1912 workspace app, for example, if desired, but the feature set you're gonna get is frozen in time. So there's not gonna be backporting, or in the moment, for example, we release background blurring, it won't be available in the 1912 workspace app. So just keep an eye on the features that are being requested by your organization and try to map them to the proper versions. So you can see that in the right side, the 2203 VDA could be used with our 2203 workspace app or a current release workspace app, and then you have the price. So if you stay on an all LTSR path, you get a third price, because the 2203 release, it's a very good release. It might be missing some features, but it gives you a lot of the features that have been blockers. So it gives you multi-window, it will give you give the control, and dynamic E911 integration with app protection. So it also gives you app sharing. So it's a good release to be on if you're an LTSR customer. Definitely try to get there. If you cannot use current release because of your internal compliance or the internal deployment models, at least try to stay close to that release. So 2203, it's an LTSR release, and it's a very good one because it included a lot of features that were released prior. The best way, in my opinion, is to, if you want, you can stay on the 2203 VDA, but at least keep current on the workspace app, and that will give you almost everything. So new things that are coming down the road, like background blurring, that requires a workspace app upgrade. Then if you stay in the current release, you will get it, because the media engine there will be upgraded eventually, and we will include background blurring feature without touching the VDA. But there is still a possibility for some features to require a VDA change. I don't think this is going to happen. We are trying to avoid this as much as we can, but I cannot commit that in the future there won't be a feature that requires a new VDA. And that's when staying current release on everything, infrastructure and workspace app, will pay off. And that's why you get the first prize. By guaranteeing that you're in a current release track, then you don't have to worry about the roadmap. Just upgrade to the next version and you will get the feature. Versus the LTSR, where we are not going to backport. You will get whatever was released prior to it. So again, this is an important exercise. This is part of my blog. If you just look in the Citrix blogs, look under my name, you will see this diagram and other diagrams and recommendations. So keep an eye on this. Try to map the feature request to the proper versions. speak to your team's admin frequently. Try to understand what the business units are demanding, so you can manage the expectations as well, right? If there is a business unit that's demanding background blurring, then you can plan accordingly. You can tell them it's coming down the road this quarter, so till then you can find either an alternative solution, turn off optimization, whatever that interim solution is, but you can handle the expectations properly. Okay, this is a busy slide. Again, I recommend you take a look at my blog and spend some time there and trying to understand the features and the version.
And then I'm going to cover a few, actually a couple of the case studies that I've been involved in just the last 2 or 3 months. But before we go into the details about these case studies, I wanna, and those case studies actually show up the challenges we were faced when we went to see why they say the Teams doesn't work or Teams optimization doesn't work. So before I get into these case studies, because they're not going to take so much time to go over, I want to emphasize a couple things that everybody should be aware of. Once you go into the Teams optimization, designing, configuring, troubleshooting, you gotta make sure that you understand the workflow, how that works. And Fernando covered that really, really well in the slide, one of the previous slides. So you've got to make sure what's the VDA responsible for, how that signaling goes. When the teams understand, when the Azure Cloud or Microsoft 365 Cloud understands that you're running actually on the VDI, it will invoke the Citrix APIs, and those APIs will be responsible to invoke the WebSocket services agents and then the service HDX service that will try to transfer the audio video traffic down to your workspace app, and then from the workspace app itself, it will try to reconnect around circumventing the HDX channel and not using HDX channel for the audio video. So you gotta keep in mind, like, where are you troubleshooting, and then once you start troubleshooting, you gotta figure out what's broken. That is, but really before even like designing, implementing, troubleshooting, you have to understand really deep down how that Teams optimization works. So for that matter, any audio video optimization will take the channel outside, take the traffic, audio video traffic outside the HDX channel. So for the first case study, we really had a global team A. So what was the challenge for this one? Now we went into environment, Teams shows optimized, but they said it doesn't work. Well, the experience was really subpar experience. The teams kept freezing. They went out of the sync. There is like audio video went out of the sync. They had a lot of issues there. And then we got in and started our troubleshooting sessions. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my monologue, we have to understand what happens. What we did is look it up how the traffic goes. So once you have the Teams optimization, you got to make sure that there is no proxying or interfering with the traffic between the VDA and the endpoint, as well as your endpoint and the turn servers in Microsoft Cloud. So the first thing we did, and we discovered that there is a proxying of the WebSockets between the VDA and the CWA. There is an article that actually really explains what you need to return direct if you're doing the proxy servers, and then you have to have 127.0.0.1 on port 9002 to have direct return if you're using the pack files on your proxy servers. However, the documentation says that the Teams will show up unoptimized, which is not the case. The Teams still showed optimized, but that was the issue. We did proxying of that traffic. The next thing that we actually found out that was I don't want to say problematic, the VDA version, but it was one of the CRs that could possibly have a memory leak. And I think that's what actually happened with this company, that the VDA itself had a memory leak, and it wasn't apparent for the short conferences that will last for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. But we had these users had a training on in Teams, and they would be sitting for 7-8 hours within a same meeting, and then the memory will just keep going, increasing and increasing and increasing to the point that just the VDA freezes, everything freezes. They have to go in, kill the teams, rejoin the meeting, and that was the fix. Another couple of things that we also checked, and it wasn't in place, the antivirus exclusions. That's not going to fix your issue. It will help not to scan for every single exe that was used by Microsoft Teams. However, make sure the Citrix tech zone actually has a very good and very frequently updated AV exclusions. So make sure that the WebSockets and then HDX RDC is also excluded from scanning. You can mark those as safe, again, if your security team allows you to do so. Another GPU, so GPU, vGPU, if you don't use it, make sure you disable it. If you use it, then use it to their extent. But this environment was fully integrated into Azure. So once we had it, like nobody used the GPU, we had to make sure that that GPU / vGPU is actually excluded and not used whatsoever. Azure VM instances, I don't want to say they were inadequate, but they were D2s. 2 vCPUs, 8 gig of RAM, good for some workloads, but when it comes to Teams and in quite a few things, as soon as they upgraded to the higher instance, the D4s, as soon as they upgraded to 4 vCPUs and then 16 gigs of RAM, it was way better. It wasn't just upgrading those instances. All of these machines were dedicated VMs, and they used temporary disks. Once you upgrade the machine from D2 to D4, you also get a bigger IOPS and faster disks in it. Now the MTU size. MTU size is something that you kind of have to look it up, but it wasn't necessarily associated with the teams because we went troubleshooting. They had issues with other solution that wasn't optimized. They had the teams that showed optimized, but the other VoIP solution that we went in and checked it wasn't optimized. It was just going through the HDX channel, and when it went through the HDX channel, we saw a lot of transmissions. Again, Azure-based workload. We use the gateways. We use the Azure gateways to connect to traffic. So as soon as we run the session, CTX session-3, showed up the MTU is like 1500, and we know like it's 1400 or 1350 when you use the gateways in Azure. So that was another thing we needed to fix, just to allow to avoid client retransmissions for other solution than Teams. So that was one use case that we went over and kind of did quite a good job. Now they're working fine, they're okay. The easiest fix for them was to upgrade, immediate fix for them to upgrade their instances to D4s. Once you get to D4s, they didn't have those issues of the VMs freezing. Now they're fixing up the literally bullet point by bullet point what has been identified as a not optimal for the Microsoft Teams optimization. The next case study is even though it's
sorry, I'll add a few details there because it's a good slide. Amber, can you go back one sec? So so those are important points. The application on the virtual desktop still requires proper care because Teams has to open a WebSocket connection to the Citrix services, and I've seen a lot of cases where proxies on the VDA interfere with that.
Yep.
So we have a few recommendations in the CTX article. That's CTX 253754, and there we provide a few guidelines. Pack files are pretty cumbersome, and I've seen customers with pack files on the VDA have issues with Teams, and pack files require proper handling, explicit proxies, transparent proxies. So you gotta make sure that the WebSocket connection from Teams to the services is unhindered. And I've seen antivirus software also mess up with that WebSocket connection. It takes a lot of time to troubleshoot until you figure out why, but again, the same CTX article explains how that WebSocket connection should be established and how to monitor proper establishment. I've seen a lot of customers with sizing issues. So the GPU, if you have a GPU on the VM, then Teams will try to use it. But if you don't have a GPU, Teams by default might try to leverage the CPU instead to render UI components, and that's going to take a toll on that CPU. It's going to spike it quite a lot. So there is a setting in Teams that you can disable.
Yeah, you have to disable it in configuration itself. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good points. So let's move over to the next case.
Yeah. The next use case was I'm going to say it was a little bit more interesting because the troubleshooting took us a lot of time to find something that I'm going to talk about it. So we had a client. They're using the if I say anything about the client, you're going to know who it is. But so I'm not. We had a client that used the Teams and other same thing, other software soft phones for as an unoptimized solution, and the Microsoft Teams as an optimized solution. So when we got into it, Teams, the problem or challenge was the Teams showed the intermittent jitter and then black screen, and then other solution was in the same solution. They just couldn't get enough. They were just it would be unsynchronized. So you would see someone like close the mouth, but you hear the voice. So it wasn't a synchronizing communication, and even the other VoIP solution would do the same. So we went in, we looked it up a lot of things, and then quite a few of those things were set up right. The one thing that we actually run into it, and that was a fix when we did the troubleshooting. We looked it up into the firewall. Firewall actually did the firewall, the traffic, and then proxy the traffic, but external traffic to the turn server. So that had to be taken off and not not interfere with just the connectivity from the external point to the Microsoft O365 cloud. When we asked about QoS, they said, yeah, it was set up. And we asked, like, what is your QoS? They said 80. Assumption was 80%. And we were troubleshooting for literally few days until we get back to the networking and say, like, can you show us that QoS? And they show us, and it was, I'm not lying, it was 80, but not 80%, 80 megs per second on a gig link. So as soon as they changed that, it really went the Teams went fine. And then the MTU was set for the second data center. MTU set a little bit higher than what they had an MTU on their switches or the network itself, but that was affecting the other VoIP solution. So again, you can you really have to do your due diligence. This was very surprising, and I put this case study right in there because I find it interesting. I always find these troubleshooting sessions like solving a puzzle, and like the first case study was okay. We were troubleshooting just like Teams, and then we found a few things that will fix the Teams, but this one is the networking. And then as soon as they changed that 80 megs per second to 80% of the available bandwidth, which was a gig between the data center and the locations they were in, everything went fine. And they also had some other issues with some other applications, but this is strictly talking about the Teams and then some of the other audio video traffic. Pass the baton back to Fernando.
Thank you. So in this slide, it's a summary of all the common issues that the admin needs to take care of. So let's go over one by one. Then I'll start with the network because that's critical. And the Citrix admin is generally not. I mean, he doesn't spend most of his day talking about the network, right? Once you get a connection between a data center and the branch office, you expect the HDX traffic to do all that it's supposed to do, and you rarely talk to the network admin. Once you have a solution deployed in production, then the HDX traffic doesn't require constant maintenance when it comes to the network. But Teams changes that game because now we we have offloaded all the multimedia traffic outside of the ICA protocol. All the WebRTC traffic is handled by the endpoint itself from the branch office. And now you have to start talking about to the network admin again. There are a lot of things that a network admin needs to take care of when it comes to real-time traffic. TCP versus UDP at the branch office. Are proxies used on the branch office? Are these anonymous proxies, explicit proxies with authentication, NTLM? What type of authentication they require to get out to the internet? Do you have a bandwidth sizing done at the branch office? You can imagine that a conference call or a video call will squeeze quite a few megabits out of the network, and now start multiplying that by how many users you have there or concurrent users. So proper bandwidth analysis has to be done. There are a few tools that Microsoft has on their website, like the network planner that you can use. But it's a question that needs to be answered. If you don't have proper bandwidth, then forget about a good quality, right? I see proxies hindering with Teams traffic. You have to talk to the proxy team as well. This is a new member of the family, so you'll have to talk not only to the network guys, but the proxy team also has to come in, and they have to give you a very explicit answers. If you have thin clients that are running Linux, how are these thin clients going to go through the proxy? And if the proxy enforces authentication, right, NTLM or whatever. So there are a few things that change the moment you have to offload the multimedia traffic to the branch office. I've seen a lot of issues with single server scalability. Now going back to the virtual desktop, you're going to have to plan for an increased server resource. I think more or less the rule of thumb that we're giving out, it's a 40% increase in CPU just by deploying Teams. So as you know already, probably, Teams is a resource-hungry application that requires CPU and RAM from the virtual desktop, and specifically to the CPU, you will see an increase that has to be accounted for. You can't expect to deploy Teams in the golden image and keep the same user density, even if the traffic is optimized. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about the Teams app running idle on the virtual desktop. It will increase your CPU by doing things like chat and browsing through channels. You will see CPU spikes that have to be sized and accounted for. So plan accordingly. Do some type of stress testing in your environment. You're the only one that can provide a more accurate number. Our test, it's kind of a vanilla test, but what we know that even on those conditions, we need 40% more CPU. So plan that accordingly. Otherwise, if your CPU is not properly sized, the Teams app will freeze, or the interactivity with the session might be impacted. So all these things have to be accounted for, and this varies from customer to customer, right? The SSS numbers are not equal in any two customers. GPU, I mentioned before, Teams will use a GPU if it's there, but if it's not there, just make sure you're not enabling that setting in the Teams configuration menu, because otherwise it's going to try to use the CPU to render UI elements. That's a killer for performance and scalability. I see a lot of cases where Teams optimization failed. It failed to optimize. So that's like the first step, right? We need to get optimized before we can make the traffic offloaded, and that means that Teams has to detect the VDA has to open a WebSocket service. Then we need a virtual channel back to the workspace app. Those things have to happen sequentially until we get an end-to-end communication between Teams and the media engineering workspace app. Teams optimization failures are generally related to VDA side problems. We mentioned a few. So a proxy on the VDA, an antivirus software on the VDA can mess up with the WebSocket connection. There are fixes we introduced in later releases, like 1912 CU4, that are important. CU5 also important. If you're on the 1912 track, at least make sure you're jumping all the way to CU4. CU3, CU2, CU1, they all had issues with the WebSocket that were fixed later. Or if you're on current release with 2106 VDA or higher, you're getting all the latest fixed. But yeah, Teams optimization failure, start looking at the VDA. I see some scenarios where when that's prevented, and then we cannot even establish a virtual channel. I see a lot of issues with thin clients. So thin clients from the old days, like you were using those thin clients for Skype for Business and optimization pack, and now you were not able to refresh them, and you want them to be able to sustain an HD call with Teams. Teams, it's more challenging than Skype for Business in terms of resource and CPU consumption at the thin clients. And I see a lot of legacy thin clients out there, like dual cores with 1.1 gigahertz of frequency, 1.5 gigahertz of frequency, or sometimes like the Atom processors or Celeron processors that are not designed to keep up with HD and multimedia calls. And we do have a minimum requirement published in our website, but I see a lot of customers that for whatever reason they're not able to upgrade, and then the performance will suffer, because we cannot establish an HD call, or the endpoint's CPU is going to be running at 100%, and that's going to cause video freeze or lip sync issues. So you got to take care of the endpoints. If it's time for a refresh, just make sure you're doing that, right? Otherwise, you're going to have to do some manipulation on the thin client, like, for example, fixing the outgoing resolution. You're going to have to hard code that to 360p instead of doing 720p. So there are a few ways to do that. They're published in our eDocs documentation. So you can hard code the outgoing resolution of a Teams call and fix it to, I don't know, 360p, for example. That should alleviate a lot of the CPU, which suffers the most when it has to do encoding. Encoding is the most expensive activity in multimedia. So well, I recommend quad cores with at least 2 gigahertz of frequency with turbo. So if you can do turbo boost or turbo core with AMD, that's welcomed. We'll use it. There are a few challenges with turbo boost and turbo core themselves, but at least that will alleviate the CPU. Providing some room for the rest of the session to perform well, because remember, we also have to keep the HDX session running and interactivity back to the Teams application. So it's not only WebRTC traffic that we gotta care in the CPU, but also the HDX traffic back to the data center, and both are equally important, right? So yeah, the endpoints require a discussion. Do your own test as well. If you have thin clients, I know the Dell 5070 that's running with a Pentium, awesome. You got the 5070 with a Celeron, then do your math again. Try to do a stress test, see what's the maximum that you can squeeze out of the call. If you have to reduce the outgoing resolution, do it. And there are a few ways that can be done. In the future, we will get much more intelligent about this, and we're going to run a few algorithms at the beginning of the call that would allow us to pick the right resolution for the right thin client, and it will work out of the box. This is in development. Right now, we expose a registry key or a configuration, a JSON file in Linux to do so. So yeah, these are a few of the important items. It's a tiger team. The Citrix admin cannot carry all the weight alone when it comes to the Teams deployment. You need to pull in the network group, the proxy group, the Teams Unified Communications group, the Citrix guys, and definitely a project manager, right? Because there are many components now that have to be tracked. So don't try to do everything on your own as a Citrix admin just because it's Citrix. The solution now it's multimedia, and that requires other teams as well. So how to stay up to date, how to learn more. There are 4 main resources. So the CTX article, that's CTX 253754. You can Google it. It's called Troubleshooting HDX Optimization for Microsoft Teams. I write that one myself. So whenever I hear about a customer issue that's not covered there, I go back and edit it so the community can benefit. So it's always not only up to date with the latest issues and all that, it also has a section for live announcements. If there was a new feature released, a new version that included an important fix, anything that's worth knowing, it's communicated there. So bookmark that one. Then the Microsoft 365 roadmap, that's also critical because that that tells you when a feature is coming out. So at the end of the day, you can have the right workspace app, the right VDA versions, but there is a feature flag that Microsoft enables to make the feature work end to end. And that announcement of that feature flag is communicated there in the public roadmap. So whenever the feature is close to release, like in Ring 3, then Microsoft published that there, and you get an ETA on the month when the feature flag will be enabled.
That was great. Thank you so much. That was a lot of great information, and we'll make sure we get all those links to all of our attendees in the email follow-up tomorrow as well. When we post this on YouTube, we'll make sure those links are in the comment section. So,
and the one thing I want to say, read Fernando's blog. All these articles that Fernando mentioned, they're great. They're updated. Honestly, like as soon as something comes out, those articles are updated. But also read Fernando's blog. It's very good. It's a very good read. That's my recommendation from someone that has been in the field as long as I have.
Well, we actually have quite a few questions. I don't know if we can go through them all in 5 minutes, but I'm going to start with the first one. We have both VDA version 1912 LTSR CU5 for current operating systems and VDA version 715 for old operating systems. If the delivery controller is updated to version 2203 LTSR, will access to VDA version 715 and communication between CWA, DC, and VDIA still work?
Yeah, I'm almost sure you can do that, but it's not my domain of expertise. So I know that we documented an FAQ about this type of scenarios. All I can say is for teams, the delivery controller doesn't play a big role. In fact, the Teams optimization policy is enabled by default on the VDA. So any VDA that supports Teams optimization will start assuming that it has to optimize Teams, even if the controller is on an older version. You can, of course, use the controller to turn it off if desired, but that's the only policy. There's nothing else that the VDA will check from a controller when it comes to Teams, only if it has to optimize or not. And then the VDA is autonomous at that point. So you could even mix and match. For example, keep a delivery controller from 1912 and a VDA from 2203. I know customers that are planning to do that. I just don't know how far can you go with 715.
You can go fairly.
Yeah.
No, you can go fairly back. I mean, you can do the delivery controller will recognize VDA regardless of the version. I've done some funky stuff that's not definitely supported, but it will, like, as long as you allow that version to register, it will register. Now, what you can do with that VDA, that's another question. Does it support optimization or it doesn't? That's a big question. But from just a architecture perspective, yeah, you can do that. You can mix and match. Not recommended though, but you can do it.
Awesome. All right. So the next question I have is WebRTC something that is supposed to be installed when you're running on-prem VDI or CVAD? I've seen this, all I've seen is a list of references to Azure Virtual Desktops. Can you clarify?
Not sure I fully understood, but WebRTC, it's not a component you install. It's packaged with Workspace app. So any Workspace app version has the WebRTC Media Engine built in. So you don't have to worry about any plugin, any MSI on the thin client or on the endpoint. Workspace app, it's all you need. That's different from the old days. So for example, Sky for Business Optimization Pack required a plugin called RTME to install on the endpoint. The Zoom and WebEx, for example, also require plugins on the endpoints. But Microsoft Teams, it's built into the Workspace app. So that's all you need. A good version of Workspace app, like a current release or one that supports Teams optimization. I think we started with Workspace app 1906, and anything after that, it includes the WebRTC Media Engine. I do see a lot of customers with older receivers. That's unfortunate, but yeah, I guess sometimes it's hard to control in BYOD environments. Very old receiver versions, online plugins, and those don't support Teams optimization. So we're gonna fall back and render all the multimedia on the server in that case.
Yeah, and I don't think that's relevant. Is it on-prem or cloud? As long as you have your VDA, as long as you have your CWA or workspace hub that supports the Teams optimization, you should be fine. Now the newer versions support more features, but I really can't remember what was. If Fernando says it's 1906, 1906, but try to keep current as possible.
Yeah, especially in workspace hub, no doubt. And yeah, there's no difference. That's true. I mean, cloud, on-prem, it doesn't matter where the workload is. When it comes to multimedia, everything now is offloaded to the client. So the more important question is how well can the network between the branch office and the Teams cloud connect? So do you have an express route? Do you have some sort of MPLS link that can take your traffic unhindered back to the Microsoft cloud? Yeah, and of course all the appliances, but the network itself. So if you're using an ISP and the user is working from home, then okay, you have no control. But if it's a branch office that has it's under your control, then make sure that the network it's optimized in that sense. Not for Teams exclusively, for any Microsoft traffic, right? Any Office 365 traffic between the branch office and the Microsoft cloud needs to be properly taken care of. So yeah, that part of the network is critical. Branch office to the ingress points in Office 365.
Awesome. I'm going to cut in here now, gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving so much great detail to those questions. I wanted to thank all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We have a number of webinars that we have posted on our YouTube channel that we've done in the past. So make sure you follow us on all of our social media. And we've got lots of great events. If you're in the Montreal area, we do have an in-person event tomorrow. So make sure you reach out to myself or Todd. And then we have an in-person event in Toronto coming up on May 19th. So if you are in the GTA area, we'd love to host you as well. Thank you again. Thank you, Fernando and Jelko, for joining us. Thank you, Todd, for joining us today. It's great to have everyone. I will let you go. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Bye. Thanks, guys.